Hello everyone. I love sports cars, and I'm sure you guys do too. But let's face it, there are some journeys in life where reality intervenes and no matter how fast your car is, you're just not going to enjoy it. What you really need is a car that's comfy, luxurious, and can cross hundreds of miles and deliver you to your destination feeling relaxed and at one with the world. Now the great news is that a car that'll do all of that is available at a price that will not break the bank. And that's why today I'm here reviewing this, a 3-litre diesel Audi A8. I think it's actually kind of cool. But because this is a car which is as much about the experience of being inside as it is the experience of driving it, let's quickly do a little bit of a walk around and I'll show you some of this car's many features. The first thing that strikes you when you're looking at the A8 is the sheer scale of the thing. Now this car's in a very muted colour scheme, as most of them are. Now I think the biggest giveaway of quite how large this car is the fact that these are actually 19-inch wheels. And they look tiny, don't they? But they really aren't. Let's see exactly how big they are. The rear tyres on this car are 255 45 19s. So you've got a massive sidewall, and that of course is going to help this car with its primary aim, which is delivering you to your destination in comfort. Now the thing with an A8 is that it should be equally as enjoyable to drive as it is be driven in. The interior in this one is in a fairly classic and fairly safe scheme. You have gorgeous black leather everywhere, and you have this combination of wood and aluminium. Now, the owner of this car and I both agree that wood is probably not our first choice, but in a car like this, you kind of get away with it. It's an interesting mixture of materials too, because in the door you'll see you have your kind of standard sort of vinyl effect stuff here. Then you got this wood, then you got the brushed aluminium, then you've got a bit of Alcantara or suede type material before you then move back to plastic, and it's just a mixture of everything. And of course your seats are then leather as well. Now moving around the back, you have the pimp spec glass at the back, nice privacy glass there. A gargantuan rear screen, heated of course. Now the boot in this is not actually as large as I thought it might be. It is of course electric. Of course electric. And it comes with a stick in the back for beating away all of your adoring fans, because obviously to own this car you're probably some sort of gangster, rapper, something like that. So the boot is a decent size, but I wouldn't say that it's actually huge. It's probably a similar size to that in my Impreza. And the owner of this car also owns the RS5 that you saw me review, and I'm pretty sure the boot in that is basically the same size, but it's still big enough, and I'm sure you can get clubs in here. Now in the back of the car there's a very trick child seat, which is quite cool, and obviously for the owner's daughter. DVD screens have been added aftermarket. This centre rest is amazing. You've got your first aid kit hidden in the back here, very standard for German cars. You have a nice storage compartment here with remotes for the DVD players, cup holders hidden under here, and no fewer than 3 12-volt outlets down here. That's quite spectacular. Up front, of course, though, is where things get really interesting. Now, this, of course, being Audi's flagship, they have sort of gone to town on making this interior the nicest place to be that they possibly can. To start the car, standard procedure, foot on brake, and press this lovely aluminium start-stop button. At which point the car comes alive, your screen appears, copyrighted music starts playing. There you go. And the car has started. It's an 8-speed auto. Of course you're going to have an auto. And the car does have a few interesting tricks up its sleeve. So I want to show you one with the Sat-Nav in particular that the owner showed me. So the menu is going to be familiar to basically anyone that's got an Audi of this kind of era. And one of the nice things is you can make it go away, which I do love. Because let's face it, in a few years' time, this is going to be horrendously out of date. You've got the iDrive style connector here, or Audi sort of attempt at it. So let's say we want to navigate to somewhere. You can use this little pad down here. So it's basically an Etch-a-Sketch, as the owner describes it to me, or it's a touch-sensitive pad. So you type in here, So yeah, someone spent far too much time on doing that. Now, of course, this being top of the line Audi, you have a gorgeous selection of driving modes to choose from. So let's go into the car's setup options now. You have, of course, auto, you've got comfort, dynamic, and individual. Individual, of course, allows you to set your own preferences, and that extends to some quite crazy options. So you can have the engine and gearbox in comfort or dynamic. You can set the air suspension the same. So now if I change this to comfort, I don't know if I can feel a difference. If I set it to dynamic, I think the car maybe just lowered itself a little bit. Kind of hard to tell, to be perfectly honest with you. Steering, comfort, cornering light, auto, belt tensioner. I don't know why there's an option for the belt tensioner in this car. Really couldn't tell you. You of course have things like cruise control. You've got the obligatory Bose sound system in here, which does sound pretty tasty. Cup holders under here. It's just full of stuff. You've got your little CD and SD card slots nicely hidden away here. This wheel is pretty nice. It's been sort of, I don't know whether they start smooth or they're worn smooth. I'm not a particular fan of the feel, but this interior has worn its 100-something thousand miles very well. The car also does some impressive figures. Now you'll notice that the range remaining is 710 miles. This car has a 90-litre tank. Now that's not just there to disguise poor fuel economy. I'm told that on the motorway this car will actually do a genuine 50 to the gallon. So what Audi are going to do when diesels get killed off, I really don't know. It's not going to be slow either, because this car has been remapped and it is now producing 320 horsepower up from the 200-something standard and 650 newton meters of torque. That's 480 pound-foot of torque. That's a huge amount. So despite the fact that it is a big old lumbering boat, it should move. Immediately upon getting in this thing, it does feel big. Now I've actually got the camera on the front, so I can sort of see where the end of the car is. You can actually see quite a bit of the bonnet, which I'm impressed at. I feared that you wouldn't be able to. Car's currently in Robert's individual mode, which includes the air suspension being in auto and most other settings being in comfort, including the belt tensioner. What I'm going to do, just for journalistic purposes, is I'm going to start off by driving the car in comfort, go along, see how well it does as that, and then put it into dynamic and try a little bit of slightly sportier driving, which of course will not be this car's speciality, but it'll be interesting to see quite how it fares. I'm just poodling along here in town. Car's doing its job. It feels gargantuan. I feel really high. That's what I wasn't expecting. Now, I've just come out of my Alpha 147, so it's not like I've jumped out the Lotus into this. And I do feel like I'm quite tall. It's a big car. It's like a car scaled up. And when you look at it on its own, it doesn't maybe look too massive, but crikey, it feels it from where I'm sat. Oh, look, an F-Type convertible. I've never driven an F-Type. No idea what they're like. If you've got one and you'd like me to have a go, let me know. But I asked Jaguar and they said no. Now, they came with a variety of engines, this of course being probably the most common, the 3-litre V6 diesel. They also came with the option of a 4.2-litre V8 diesel, and there was a few tasty petrol engines as well. There's the 6-litre W12, if you really have to drain your local petrol station in a hurry. And they had the 4-litre twin-turbocharged S8, which is a car that I think is really cool. Unfortunately, as much as my heart says get one of them, my head says you do realise that for all intents and purposes, most of the time it's going to be the same car as an A8, it'll just drink more fuel. Because let's be honest here, if you want a car that's sporty, an A8 is not the place to start. It's for luxury. Now, that S8 had about 500 horsepower, and they later did an S8 Plus with about 600. That'll be quite good fun to drive, I think. Now, I've sat in one of those. There's a later one, and they're just gorgeous. It had, I think, diamond stitched leather and lots of carbon fibre in here rather than the wood. Stunning, absolutely stunning. I like the blend of gauges here, you know, with the traditional dials and then the screen in the middle. I like that. That's how I want my gauges to be. Everything in here does feel like it's from the top level. You know, it feels like this is the nicest stuff that they had. Now, German manufacturers are very, very bad at making the low-end cars feel really, really low-rent. But by the same token, when you get a high-end one, oh, they're nice. Really, really nice. This car has air suspension, so it's currently pretty good. Given the weight of the car, it's not easy to make something this heavy feel very, very comfortable. It's one of these odd things you eventually learn as you start driving more and more cars. So, for example, one of the comfiest cars you'll actually drive is something like a Caterham. I know that sounds completely counterintuitive, but because the car is so light, the dampers don't have too much work to do. Okay, let's shift this into sport mode, set the car to dynamic. We're coming up to a national speed limit. Let's see what she does. Blimey, it pulls. So now I've set the car in dynamic. The steering has become noticeably heavier. That car pulled so well. Given the fact that it is 1 degree out there, and this is a massive barge and not my barge, I'm not going to push it too hard, but feels nice and planted. It of course has Quattro all-wheel drive, and this being a high-end Audi, it'll have the high-end Quattro system. There's no Haldex here. This is the second time in, well, fairly recent memory that we've had snow. This is most unusual. For those of you watching and trying to work out how I recorded and then released my videos, well, the stuff you saw with the snow a couple of weeks ago was a couple of weeks ago. And it's come again. The beast from the east, they're calling it. Some Siberian wind or Arctic wind or something along those lines. But this is nowhere near as severe as the last downpour that we had, where things were really, really covered. This is a very, very comfy car. The seats in this don't look as amazing as those in, say, the S8, but they are really nice, really comfy. Even in dynamic mode with everything set to sporty, the car is still extraordinarily comfortable. It's what you want it to be. I'm just wary of the sheer size of the thing. I think there's one reason I prefer the steering in its heavier mode, because it's a heavy car and it reminds you of the heft of it. Wow, it moves. It really moves. I'm not using the paddles yet, I'm just letting it shift on its own. Now, I have to be careful up here because this is actually, you can jump this quite easily if you're not careful, and I'm not jumping a 2-ton barge. So some of you might be thinking, why am I reviewing this car? Well, a couple of reasons. Number one, I love Ronin, so big Audis are quite cool, in my opinion. Number two, these cars are genuinely great value. I said at the start that if you wanted something comfy and luxurious that won't break the bank, to get one of these, and if you're not sure what I'm talking about, okay, new, this car probably cost, a good 70 grand. You can spec them over 100 if you go all out and you go with the long wheelbase version and the W12 engine and you hit the options list. That's easily done. In fact, the W12 A8L was more expensive than the S8, and there was never an RS version of the 8. There was an RS6, but never an RS8. I think it would have been quite fun if they had, but ultimately it would have been pointless, so I understand why they didn't. So I was browsing the classifieds the other day, as you do, window shopping, we all do that, right? And I was looking at a beautiful example of a car just like this. I think it was maybe a year earlier. 3-litre diesel, actually quite low mileage, and it was up for £15,000. I've seen earlier ones and earlier generation ones go for as little as about 6 or 7 grand. And the reality is, you buy one of these, stick a private plate on, job's a good one. Instant taxi, luxury business cruiser, whatever you want from it. Now, there's a couple of downsides. Number one, if it breaks, it is still a 70 or 80,000 pound car. I know someone that ran one of these as a chauffeur, as an executive taxi, and the gearbox in it went £4,500 to fix it. That wasn't to replace it, that was to fix it. So those kind of things can happen. By and large, these are, I'm told, very, very reliable cars. And I think a large part of the reason for that is that the sort of people that buy an RS4, generally speaking, are not going to be the sort of people that buy one of these. They're sold to a different crowd. Now, as it happens, in this case, the gentleman that owns this owns the RS5. But this is the one that he's done all of his miles in. Because as much fun as the RS5 is, and that car is a lot of fun, it's much worse on fuel, not really any quicker, and it's not as comfy. So he's put some 60,000 miles on this in just a few years. And so would I. If somebody phoned me now and said, James, you got to go to Scotland, quick. This is the kind of car I'd jump into. Now look, something like my Lotus has great GT capability, but ultimately it is still a sports car. This, though, is a luxury express. This is really, really nice. And, although it might cost a lot of money to fix it, there's a few other ways you can save money. Because they're not the sort of car bought by hooligans, they're reasonably cheap to insure. And this one certainly gets fairly good fuel economy. Personally, I might be tempted, although it would probably be a foolish thing, by the 4.2 litre V8 diesel. That's kind of cool, isn't it? Now, the great shame is, of course, that you probably can't drive it many places in Europe now, or you won't be able to soon. That is a real shame, because that seems to be what this car is meant to do. Now, I'd certainly call this a four-seater. You can get 5 people in here, but this is a four-seater, really. Certainly if you're going to be doing taxi duty, the boot simply isn't big enough to carry 5 people's luggage, or 4 people's luggage if you're the driver. The AAL, I suppose, is what you would have if you're going to be a taxi driver. The biggest benefit there is that your passengers in the back get that much more legroom. Going to put this car into manual mode now for the drive back and see how the gearbox performs. One thing I'm incredibly impressed at, the response from this engine. The turbo lag's pretty minimal considering it's a big old diesel. Whoa, this pulls, Jesus, that's, oh, I've got to remember it's 1 degree out, no degrees out there now. Crikey, oh blimey, this car. This is real proper iron fist velvet glove job. Really, really is. I know, get this around the twisty, something like that Mini that's just gone past is gonna be all over you, because ultimately, I don't care how good your chassis is, 2 tons is 2 tons. But, by and large, wow, what a machine. Oh, whoops. It's a bit easier to get the car off the ground than I thought, apparently. This, to me, is what a German car should be. This is what an Audi should be. Never mind the RS3 and all that little stuff, those little tiny cars. This is a proper car. I think 60, 70 years ago, when people were thinking where the motor car was gonna go, I think this is where they saw it going. Big, large, comfortable, fast. There's not an awful lot I can really say about this car, because it's, I think, the most honest of German cars. It's not pretending to be sporty, and because of that, it then surprises you with its sporting ability. It's just pretending to be big, soft, comfy and luxurious, and it's all of those things. Yeah, of course there's no feel from the steering, don't be silly. But it's comfy. Got my lovely sound system to keep me occupied. Doesn't drink fuel like it's going out of fashion. You know, I've averaged 30 to the gallon in the short drive that I've done. Get it cruising. With this 8-speed gearbox, the thing's barely ticking over at 70 miles an hour. So if I had to choose between this or Rob's RS5, how would I differentiate the two? Okay. If you've only got one car and you want something that's sporty and practical and does all that kind of stuff, get the RS5. Let's ignore the chronic fuel bill for a moment. Because that car is still a very, very decent cruiser. It's still got many luxuries inside it, but it's that bit more sporty. You know, when you really want to enjoy yourself, it's good. Again, it's not a great car, but it's better than this one. This one can do a sort of sporty impression, but generally speaking, what it is a soft cruiser. And that's fine. If you've already got yourself a sports car, though, this is the one you want. So for me, this would be the one that I would buy. It's more than quick enough. I mean, actually, to be perfectly honest, I think that RS5 would struggle to get away from this. You'd have to really, really work that engine. You'd have to get that power out of it, because it's not got the torque. There's something like a 160 pound-foot difference in torque between the two. It's a bit grey. I'd change the spec of this. I would have carbon or something and not wood. You know, I'd have a different exterior colour, maybe a darker shade of grey. I don't like the light headliner, but honestly, I'm nitpicking here. Even the nav and stuff it's functional. It's a generation on from that RS5, so around about this era, Audi updated things. So, although it does feel its age a little bit, you know, this is a 6-year-old car, it still works fine. And of course, the best bit is that, you know, if you're tired of all this, you just press a button and it goes away and hides itself, and that's really, really nice. So, it's a car that gives you choices. If you want to be involved in the drive, you can whack it in manual, do all this stuff, play around with the settings. Or if you just want to get in it and go somewhere, you don't have to tool around with anything, and it's always a comfy car. It never ever forgets its identity. So, there we go. A bargain cruiser. I also really, really like the BMW 7 Series, but I haven't actually driven one for 10 years, so I couldn't really give you an honest assessment of which is better or not. I do, however, really like this car. Yeah. Thanks for watching, everyone. Would you like to see more of this kind of car on the channel? Used bargains, that kind of thing? Or do you prefer different stuff? Let me know in the comments section. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, do all those things that you do, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.